Cool. Make sure my phone's off. All right. 3, 2, 1. Anthony Darby. I have Brian Meyer joining me today. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Super excited to have you on today. Brian represents Solvent, and Solvent has a couple different lines of business, right? At the heart and sake of everything, I think they probably would champion that they are a company that specializes in compliant type activities, and we work with them. I mean, just so you guys know, our organization works with them on a couple different platforms. One is they're helping us out with our payment processing, but we also use them for everything for our employee background checks, for the MMCC. They are a piece of our compliance software that we use within our dispensary that handles all of our standard operating procedures and everything that we do to stay compliant with the state. So Solvent has actually been a really great partner to us. We liaison with them and work with them in a variety of different ways. And most excitingly for me today is for the very first time in history, we will be able to accept a card payment transaction within our dispensary. And this means a lot to me for a lot of different reasons. But first and foremost, the people that have known me for a long time, you guys know that I come from a payments background, right? I mean, I started my own ISO in 2009. I left that ISO to go work for American Express. Like the be able to connect all my dealings and the things I learned in the payments world. Well, I guess not to connect it for 3 years, as we'll talk about. I had all this knowledge of how payment processing worked, and still had a cash only business. And I saw a lot of these other so-called solutions that were being deployed to other dispensaries, and just knowing what I knew about compliance and card networks and PCI compliance and really the emphasis of how cards should be taken in a secure way. These companies were finding loopholes, and they were really doing some unsavory things. And we saw operators have thousands and thousands of their dollars held within accounts, and we've even skirted the lines where we've tried to do for instance, our CBD business, we tried to just get away with using a Square, get away with using a Stripe, and both times, both companies have held our money. We'll never see that money back, and we learned some lessons the hard way. So, your first kind of savior moment for us was allowing us to be able to take cards in our wellness retail store downstairs when no one else seemed to want to do that, and allow us to facilitate some online payments for CBD sales as well. So thank you so much for your help. Give us a little bit of background about how you got to Solvent, and then we'll dive into all things payments and cards and cannabis. Cool?
Yeah. Thank you for having me again, and excited to be here. And a lot's happened since the last time I was here, which was in 2019, about summertime. Pre-Solvent, I was part of TH Suite, as you
Our
know,
point of sale
and
system.
helped you guys get set up with the point of sale system. So we've had a lot of experience working together. And
Salisbury local?
Salisbury local, born and raised, right on the Wicomico River in High Banks. And during that time at TH Suite, I was in dispensaries a lot, working, with people like yourself, getting them either a new point of sale or switched over from what they were using before, and just having conversations with the owners and the staff, and just kind of talking to them about the industry in general and what were the pain points. And very glaring, it was the financial part. It was the banking and the payments part. And so I got together with a few people that I met along the way, and was like, hey guys, like, would you guys be interested in starting a company and try to tackle this problem? And long story short, we formed Solvent in the beginning of 2019, and our mission is we're a compliance technology company, fintech company that provides banking and payments solutions for cannabis-related businesses. So not just dispensaries, but really any
More high risk, right?
more high risk in general. We typically have been focusing really any business that is in the hemp, CBD, and cannabis industry. I think for us, because we're very familiar with the industry, and I mean, for me personally, it's very exciting to work in this industry with everything that's happening. But yeah, so there's really two parts of the company. The one part is on the banking side. So we've developed software that banks and credit unions use to bank their cannabis-related businesses. So, for example, Bulldog Federal Credit Union in Maryland is one of our clients. They were actually our first bank or credit union that signed on with us. So love them. And there are more banks. There's one in Maryland that hasn't came out and said what they're doing yet, but they are 100% lending focused institution, which is very exciting because businesses
Capital access in
businesses
my
like
industry
yours
is
are going to now
non-existent.
have new, more traditional ways of funding, whereas in the past, really the only way of raising money is really diluting, where you're losing equity as an owner to bring more money in to help the business grow. And I think we're finally getting to a time where more financial institutions are providing more traditional lending options to businesses like yours, which is great. So that's the banking part, and within that banking ecosystem, we do a lot of different things. And so one of them, for example, is Tim Gunther, who owns I Love Compliance. One of the requirements by the state of Maryland is annual background checks of all employees. And so he uses what we call it Terra, which is our compliance software. So he uses Terra to do those background checks for his clients, which, your dispensary is one of them. And so there's a lot of different things going on the banking side. So that's the core of what we do. And now that we have that, and then the relationship with the banks, which allows us to do the other stuff, which the other stuff is really the payment side. One of the many reasons why payments has been so complicated is that there hasn't really been any transparency in what is happening when someone processes a transaction and it's not cash. And so there's a lot to unpack there because, as you mentioned, there have been solutions. And there's just been a lot of, side doors and fraudulent activity that, I see it today. I think
We still see it in
my
dispensaries.
biggest takeaway right now is just the distrust that's been created amongst owners with, when I reach out to someone, I have to break this wall because they already have this negative stigma about payment companies. And I get it. I totally understand.
My LinkedIn has got 10 messages from the last week of
Yeah.
shady processors that are just looking to come in. They're either going to try to write you under another business name. They're going to try to put you in like a reverse ATM, which has been for 10 years and has never really taken off. A lot of these different makeshift platforms are thrown at us. So when someone actually presents a realistic solution for us, it's typically tough for us to branch away from our experience and validate, well, why is this guy any different from what we're doing? Luckily, I've had a relationship with you and you've added value to our business for years and years. So when you came to me, I trusted you, and which was how you got through the door, right? But
Yeah.
without that trust, you got to build it, and it can be a real challenge. And for the banks as well, you got to. I think for the outsider looking in, if you don't understand the payments world, everything is done by risk. So how much the merchant pays to take a card is done by risk, and pin-based debit, where a four-digit pin is used and a card is swiped actually in front of someone, is a much safer transaction than just buying something online and providing credit card information. So with us being federally legal, and oftentimes cannabis companies have weird structural entities because of 280E and other things. When you present yourself to a bank, you look very foreign. You don't look like their traditional mom and pop business that they're used to seeing. Your financials look weird. They don't understand why your taxes look so goofy. So someone like yourself, to me, provides a ton of value to the bank, is saying, not only can we help you with your compliance, but you know that we're trustworthy and we are focused on compliance. So we're gonna forward that into actually getting some payment customers, but in our service for our payment services, we'll be as compliant as we are with our background stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's for us, our strategy has always been working with the banks first because obviously they're such a critical piece of this puzzle. From an automation standpoint, our technology, the goal is to automate their entire program from all the processes that take place because a lot of the expenses of banking in the cannabis industry is tied to the work of a human being having to manually manage that
The
and
due diligence
the due
process, right?
diligence. Yeah, I
You
mean,
got you got some lady named Helen who's sitting in an office with a stack of papers this big, and she's manually going through everything and maybe calling on vendors. And your system will allow that process to move from a paper trail stack to the computer that's basically verifying, are these guys in compliance, because you know what they have to do to be in compliance, right? And then I think another step of it is even managing a financial piece where your system is able to understand some predictability of what I should be doing financially within a certain threshold. And if all of a sudden my average credit card sales are 7,000 a day, and the next day it's 32,000, your system's going to immediately catch that and draw a flag, as opposed to, once again, Helen, who I'm making fun of for some reason, going through and pulling her spreadsheet and seeing, okay, we have an outlier here, and now I have a manual process. So what do I do? Maybe it never even gets caught if it's a manual process.
yeah, you're exactly right, and that again, that's just the acceleration of technology being used in this industry finally to help automate some of this stuff, so we can get to a more traditional landscape from payments, retail, banking, compliance. Just because I think with the current administration in charge, I think we're going to be seeing an acceleration from a state and federal standpoint of legalizing this industry.
I agree. I think Brandon asked me today what I thought of the path of legalization, and I'm not as bullish as some are, but I do believe by the end of the Biden's administration, we will see a descheduling or a rescheduling. I really think that that's something that's feasible, within the
Yeah,
next 4 years.
I agree. I think that timeline is accurate to me. I think by the end of his administration, I think we'll see federal legalization. But I think there's a couple short term catalysts that will really help businesses like yours. So there's a couple different pieces of legislation being talked about. The one being talked about the most is the Safe Banking Act. Um, uh, uh, Multiple politicians have come out in the media and said that this is their highest priority right now for a multitude of reasons. I think with COVID and us, hopefully getting around that now is we need to find sources of revenue to pay back all the money we just lent out. And I think cannabis is right there for them to finally take an industry that should have been legal well before we are now, and open up opportunities to allow you to legally run a business. And so I think the federal illegalization is going to be there for a couple more years, but with the Safe Banking Act, the hope is that 280E from a tax standpoint is a huge debilitating factor for you as a business owner, not being able to write off pretty much the majority of what you would typically be able to if you ran a business in really any other industry. The other thing is payments, and from the banks, institutions we've talked to have already, some of them have already set up their credit card programs, so they're ready to go. So they just need the go ahead, not really from the government, from the card brands themselves to be like, hey, we're going to allow these transactions. And so, with our solution right now with Pen Debit, we're able to, because we have buy-in from the bank who takes all the risk on, and we also from Visa and MasterCard and their debit networks. And so we're openly and transparently customers are able to use their debit card, enter in their 4-digit PIN. I know most people don't do that much anymore, but
I think so. For me, the Safe Banking Act presents a couple of opportunities, but where we're at today, pre-Safe Banking Act, is I think some people don't understand why we could take debit cards instead of charge cards. I think it's a fair question, right? So the way that I explain it, and follow up with this, but when you look at the back of any of your debit cards, you'll see a bunch of little logos that are not Visa, MasterCard. A lot of times you've heard of NICE, Star, Mac. Remember ATM cards used to be called Mac cards. You would go to a Mac machine back in the day. If you talked like an old timer, those are all debit networks, and right now those independent debit networks, almost all of them have bought in, will allow us to do transactions on their networks. Correct.
correct.
But when you run a charge card, when you're actually purchasing credit from someone where the bill is not due, that increases the risk of that card, increases the risk to the merchant, and those transactions will go directly on the Visa, MasterCard platform themselves. The interchange that is billed to the merchant comes from Visa, MasterCard themselves. And those transactions are unable to happen today, and that's what would change with the Safe Banking Act. So, by the time you're hearing this podcast, when you walk into our dispensary, you will be able to swipe your card, put in your 4-digit PIN number like you do at the grocery store, and execute a transaction for your goods. But ideally, within, let's say, a year, 6 months, you'll be able to come in with your American Express charge card or whatever charge card that you have that you're actually facilitating credit off of, and be able to use them, get your airline points, a lot of your points cards are going to be those charge cards. Those are the cards that, in the future we'll be seeing more of. For me, the Safe Banking Act does a couple of things. One is I believe that it will increase so we use Severn, which is Severn and Bulldog have the two largest market shares, and as Brian mentioned, there's a third bank that's going to be very aggressively coming on as well, especially looking for lending opportunities. So I think safe banking will increase our lending opportunities, which is really important. We had to build out our new location. If we were a traditional business, we would have gone to the bank and said, "Look how great things are going. Because of this, we need a bigger space, a bigger location." And they would say, "Okay, great. We'll give you a loan because you can prove that your business is accelerating and that this is a good time for us to lend." But we had zero opportunities to do that, and had to cash flow our own build out. Which at one point, I remember being incredibly nervous when we opened our doors because we were down to almost like where we were when we started because we had to spend our own money to get here. So the lending piece is something I'm excited about. The addition of more financial products to make us more in line with the traditional business and things that they're offered. I think the insurance world will loosen up as well with the safe banking. That's still a challenge for us right now. We still pay really high premiums on all of our insurances. I can tell you, looking through something through like delivery and things like that. I mean, it gets pretty pricey. And a lot of they tie back to the fact of the Schedule 1 and the non-banking piece. So I think that will really also help legitimize our business. I think in some ways the fact that we're still cash only plays into the stigma that you're not a normal business. You are still like a drug dealer. I mean, you wouldn't expect a pharmacy to be cash only. You wouldn't expect a hospital to be cash only, but you come into our medical practice and we can't accept your payments. As I'm thinking out loud, health savings accounts cards and things like that, when will they be online? They a lot of times require a PIN number, but
Who's that?
like a health savings account card, like,
Oh,
you know what I'm talking
yeah.
about?
That's actually funny because that's come up a few times. People have tried to pay with those types of cards and they were declined.
They are declined.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a whole nother
Maybe
side
in
of the
that safe
payments.
banking world, that might be something that would change as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, everyone gets a merchant code, right? So just so you know, when I would go set up whatever customer it was, a hardware store or a trash company or whatever, Visa, MasterCard independently have MCC codes, merchant classification codes, where they classify what kind of business you are. Right now, there's no classification for us because we're illegal, but my assumption is that when we do go online, they'll likely have a specific code probably just for us, right?
Yeah, I think most, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's miscellaneous stores is what they categorize
Now.
now. Yeah.
Maybe if in the future a scenario may be is they would give us our own independent code, and then ideally that code would be treated like a pharmacy or another healthcare provider. That's kind of how they're providing access to those health savings accounts cards and letting you know whether or not you're able to use them or not use them. So these things I think will all help us get to where we want to, where we want to go.
Yeah, I wanted to point out with the safe banking, just so your listeners understand, I was here Friday and you and I had a conversation. You told me about how you guys first started, and it was really enlightening because, there's a lot of different players in this industry. There's a lot of these large multi-state operators that are able to come in and basically acquire whatever they want. And then there's people like yourself that are, local, hometown people that just want to start their own business. And you guys didn't have any money when you started, and I mean, you're one of the top dispensaries in the state, which, I mean, imagine what you're going to be able to do with actual lending and
Sure.
financing to really expand is exciting. And I think that's what people need to understand is that there are so many other dispensaries like you, like PAH, that are really just your local store to go get your medicine, and we need to be able to pass this legislation so you have fair game against other uh, retail stores like a pharmacy to get the medicine to your patients.
And even just that juxtaposition between us versus like an MSO, like we're an outlier. Like we really are. We're blessed that we do, that we have the patient base that we have, and we've grown at the rate that we have. Because there's a lot of dispensaries that started out like us, but didn't have the same success, right? And their access to capital is even more challenging. And it's not fair when an MSO can just go out and do a capital raise of 100 mil, and they got it in the bank, and then you're just this little mom and pop operator. You can't go to a bank and you can't go anywhere, and to your point, your only option is to keep giving away equity, and it becomes a real challenge. And then you say, okay, what happens when adult use comes? Well, if there's not a mechanism for capital, then for the small guys, then all you're going to see is MSO domination. And like our access to capital is not something that gets discussed enough. But when something like a pandemic happens, when something like the opportunity to move happens, everything that we do is 10 times harder because we can't go to a bank and we don't have access to capital. And I just think that if we really don't want to see the harvest of the world and everything become a cure leaf, then you're really going to have to open up some capital access to businesses. And when you look at like I think it's another step farther. It's a bit of a hot take, but when you look at the aspirations to build up the minority businesses in this community, right,
Mm-hmm.
and in the state, as working with one firsthand, it becomes an even greater challenge for those guys because it's tougher for them to get money in their communities. They don't have the same access that some of the other communities do, and then they can't go to a bank. Well, then how do you expect these guys to be able to compete against their peers if they don't have the same resources and capital to compete? You're setting them up for failure. You're almost making them, with no bank access, go to only rich white guys to get money because, quite frankly, that's where most of the capital in the cannabis industry comes from because you have to talk to someone's grandfather. You got to talk to somebody who made money privately, that has enough private wealth that they're willing to give you in a high risk business their capital, right?
Yeah,
It's crazy.
you're
It's like,
exactly right. I mean, again, that's why this legislation needs to pass because I mean, I'm seeing just that. I mean, at some point when a large MSO comes knocking on your door is like, hey, I'll buy your dispensary for 20 million, like, you're gonna think about that because it's like, all right, well, what's the current landscape? Are we gonna be able to expand? What's our 5 year roadmap? And for a lot of these, it's like, well, there's not a level playing field. I really have no other option, and so I do think there needs to be a leveling of the playing field because we don't ms multi-state operators are great. I love what they're doing, but at the end of the day, like for me, when I go to a dispensary, I'm going to the local one-stop shop.
yeah.
And for me, not to talk bad about an MSO, but for me, the whole customer experience and the vibe is so much better going into a unique dispensary like yourself that this is your only occasion, like this is it. And I want to support that as much as I can, and we need to be able to financially support
I
the system needs to financially be able to support you too.
I think the difference, I think there's some pros and cons to each, but for me, the one thing that I'm really bullish on are owner operator models.
Yeah.
When I look at dispensaries, when I look at grows, when I look at different companies within the state, and then I see the ones, like for instance, a Curio, where Michael Bronfine's got his finger on every damn thing that happens under that brand, they're phenomenal, right? And then you look at, I'm not gonna call any of my competitors, but there's other MSOs that are not ran out of the state, right? That have a central location out of state, and you just lose touch with a lot of what happens in a day to day, and you see it. And I talk to other dispensary owners that aren't involved in their operations, and they envy my business, and they tell me, what do you do this and we do that? I'm here, like I'm involved, like I'm not expecting that 20 people that aren't me are going to have as much passion and care about my business as much as I do. Like I think that's a false expectation. I don't know that you can ever expect any of your employees to care about your business as much as you do, because it's not their business. So for me, the owner operator model makes a lot of difference. And if we want to continue to see an owner operator model, we're going to have to reward these owner operators with some resources and some banking tools for them to be able to compete. Because if not, it'll just be consolidated models where one central company is going to operate and enter into 12 management agreements across the way, and just run them from a spreadsheet. And you lose that personal touch. So there's pros and cons. All right, so safe banking, I think for me that it's the other thing I think about with safe banking is the fact of, without getting overly political, I think I hope there's a general consensus to understand that a lot of things that happen are done through lobbying and done through back small room agreements of teams. So I think about like the political powerhouses. Cannabis has never been a political powerhouse when it comes to lobbying, because in my mind we come with too of a disenfranchised message. We got 25% saying social justice is our number one most important topic and everything needs to be around social justice. You got 25% saying no, we need 280E and banking and we need these things done. And you got other people saying I just want to be able to grow weed in my house and I don't want anyone to regulate it. There's all these different sects, I should say, within the cannabis industry, and we don't do a great job of all coming together on lobby day and going to DC. The banks are not like that, man. Bank of America, American Express, the car companies, Visa, all those guys, they fight 364 days a year. But when it comes to banking lobby day, they are all together. They got their 3 initiatives and their pinpoints, and they're going in their ham and every single one of the congressmen on their 3 initiatives, and they probably get 1 out of the 3 accomplished. So when I think about a heavy lobby like the banking lobby, who at this point, as well as I do, these guys want to be in the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
They've watched all the activity. Like, I don't think we could nerd out on this for just hours and hours, but people just don't understand all the repercussions. One of the things that will happen with safe banking is the possibility of these companies going to the stock market, correct?
Yeah. So there are many of these multi-state operators that we're talking about are publicly listed companies. Now they live on what's called the OTC market. So
Up north, right?
up north, yeah. So if you try to log into Robinhood or some of these other new virtual trading platforms, you won't find them. You'll find the Canadian ones. But, that's a huge catalyst as well, because I nerd out on this type of stuff. But if you look at the financials of these Canadian companies versus the American companies, the American companies' balance sheets they look so much better, and they're much more healthier companies than these Canadian companies. But the evaluations that they're getting currently are half the size, and a lot of it is because the same amount of people don't have access to invest money in those companies as they do with some of the Canadian operators. So that's another exciting thing, I guess, if people are interested in the stock market and investing. I mean, again, this is a generational type movement in all different directions, and I look at it, for me, from an investment opportunity. I mean, I've been following this industry for 5 years, and a lot of these companies too, and they've grown so much, and it's only just begun, because they're hopefully soon going to get access
To be able to go public.
And really have the injection of liquidity that we all know they can have, and they just don't have access to it right now.
And that's exciting too, because you have these national brands like the Cookies brand and things like that, where if these guys were able to be put into a listing and they go public, and there's going to be a lot of people that would rather invest in them than Apple and then GE and these other traditional stocks. And I'm excited to see what that does for these companies, and what it really will do, in my mind, it'll be the same bump that tech industries got when they first kind of figured out this rhythm that, hey, we don't even have to make any money. We can come up with some ideas and put together a plan and show them that we can generate revenue and not be profitable for a couple of years, but still be able to generate higher stock price and be able to build this up. And you look at the Ubers of the world and things like that. I mean, they're still not profitable, right?
No, they're not. Yeah.
But they're building a model and they're doing that. And I think the reason why I mention that is because the one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is one of the biggest consequences of the capital crunch is research and development. 100%. There's no question in my mind that if a company could go and raise money openly and say, we're not going to be profitable for 3 years, but we're going to invest in this nanoparticle technology and this product, and this is how we're going to make our money in the long run, and they have a business case for it, and we would be able to fund that research in a private way, the same way pharmaceutical companies do, the same way biotech companies do. Instead of having to just cash flow all of our research and development. I mean, shout out to Bronfine, who did a head-to-head test with his sleep tablet versus Lunesta and Ambien. It was a very expensive study. It was done the same way pharmaceutical companies do it, and the fact that, you're gonna do your own internal research, and then you're gonna let someone else do it and hope that your stuff is correct, and they're gonna come up with the same findings as you. But if they don't, that's public knowledge, right? You could easily spend $1 million for them to write a report that says your product sucks, right?
Yeah.
So in a time when almost every organization is being asked to expand just to meet demand, how do you take $1 million and not expand and put it into to patient serving products, right? Like, it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. To add on to that, I'm really excited to see where the technology of products goes, because I think we've really only scratched the surface. I mean, look, the majority of the public that is going to want to try cannabis probably isn't going to be smoking flower, maybe not even doing a vape pen. So what other options do they have? So you're starting to see drinks, edibles are starting.
Consumables, or
Consumable products that a normal person would feel comfortable doing, right? Without
It's in a form that they're way more comfortable with. They feel way more comfortable, even though they've heard of smoking a joint or eating a brownie. There's no signs with a circle over a brownie everywhere, right? But there's the idea of smoking still has a stigma, and it's tough to find a physician that will say that smoking anything is a good idea.
Yeah.
But the idea of just consuming a beverage, especially if it's not even super high in sugar, or it's not even like bad for you, it becomes, well, this seems way less scary. And it's funny to me, like, because I think that if I had to coach someone, I would absolutely tell them to try smoking a joint first, because if it sucks, it's gone in a half hour.
Right.
You take too much of an edible and, like, you're going. But I'll tell you, I'm surprised at how many folks, to your point, they feel way more comfortable trying it in a beverage form or an edible tablet. We see a lot more of that. We are very, very early in cannabinoid-based medicine. I mean, we haven't even identified all the cannabinoids yet. We haven't even identified best terpene ratios and the genetics of the plant. I mean, we're working with UMES right now, and these guys are able to crossbreed cannabis plants with plants that have more trichome development, which means more trichome development means higher terpene levels within these plants. And, like, when these nerds start messing with this plant, and we get out of, like, my grandfather grew in coffee bean soil, and, like, I mean, like, that's cool, and that got us to a certain point. But now it's time for genetics and real science that's been applied in other pieces of plant-based medicine to be leveraged in cannabis for us to really unlock and unharness what this plant can do. Because as someone who helps hundreds of people every day, I know that we could be way better at what we're doing. I mean, just know with research and development and everything we're doing right now is our own anecdotal, our own data collection. I mean, it's there's not a lot, and there's more and more out there every day. But it's I think about when we first started, and it's crazy. I mean, when we started 3.5 years ago, it was the Wild Wild West.
Oh yeah, I couldn't imagine starting dispensary back when you guys did. I mean, it was
5 strains, awakening tabs, relax tabs, synergy tablets.
I think if people
Dixie Elixir.
truly understand the road that you all have taken to get here, I think, not to say they're not appreciative, but I think they'd be even more appreciative of
Some aren't appreciative. Most are.
Of this dispensary and the industry in general. It's
I thank you for that.
it's been quite the road.
So what's the future look like?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm most excited about the future is, I think, hopefully reducing the negative stigma when it comes to talking about cannabis. I've been doing a lot of reading just about what's happened the last 40 years in regards to drugs in general. And I think just the war on drugs, in my opinion, has been a huge failure in a lot of different ways. And it's just really like every time I either watch there's been Netflix documentaries or I'm reading a book right now just talking about it, and just like I just keep questioning like how did we even get here? And so I'm really excited
Yeah, at what
that
point did they tell Nancy Reagan to cook an egg on TV and tell everybody that like this is your brain on drugs and like you're gonna die? Like,
yeah, it's because I'm forcing myself to be more open about it. Not I'm trying to hide it, but I don't like the negative stigma when I talk about it and people just either dismiss me or because I'm a high functioning business professional that uses cannabis every day, and there's a lot of people that do that as well. They just don't say it, and I want to say it. I want to be open about it because I want to have that like I want to help people. I want to have that
right.
conversation because
And challenge that preconceived
yeah,
notion.
because a lot of the times when I have discussions with people, it's typically a person that drinks pretty regularly, and they just don't can't understand that it's the same thing. One just happens to be legal, and the other one
Safe.
is safe. The other one is illegal, and yes, that wall is there, but they're the same thing.
Yeah, and like, so my personal opinion on drugs, and I've talked about this a lot, is like it's gimmick control. Like they're all gimmicks. Like the person that's quite honestly 400 pounds because they can't control themselves with sugar, that looks down at someone for smoking weed. I'm just like, no, like these are like you gotta control all these things. They're all tools, and they all in a proper balance can be enjoyable. And the fact that I felt very similar when I started this business, and part of my mission was partially due to my perspective. I was like, man, I always felt like an outcast. Like I smoke weed every morning for a very dumbed down way of talking about how I medicate with medical cannabis, but let's just say that I smoke weed every morning. And then I get up at 6 and I go to the gym and I go and do all these things. And for a while, I felt like I was the only person that was doing that, right? That I was this outlier because a lot of the people that I would smoke with or that had the cannabis passion I did, and I talk about this a lot, they didn't share the same drive, honestly. They didn't have the same entrepreneurial spirit. They were interested in more countercultural things like music festivals and things like that. And then the people that I was grinding with day to day and working 14-hour days and getting it in couldn't understand how I could smoke weed and outwork them. And when I got to open the dispensary and I got to meet Dr. Hoffman and I got to meet in my journey of creating this dispensary, I got to really meet and start working with folks like yourself and a lot of my employees. And these are folks that are using cannabis every day and are performing at a level that's higher than they would be able to without cannabis, which is completely countercultural to the narrative, but we prove it every day. And I love giving tours and like whether it's a local legislative person or it's someone from a health department, and they'll always be like, do your employees smoke weed? Yeah, every fucking one of them. Every single one of them has smoked weed this morning. And look how well they are. Look at this intelligent conversation that they're having with this patient consultation. Like, this is not something that makes that it can absolutely be abused and be something that kills your energy and makes you lethargic and makes you not as sharp mentally as you could be. But it's also a tool that if used properly could make you sharper mentally, could make you more empathetic in these consultations, could make you more mindful in how you approach your day and the things that you're doing. And that's the message that I'm constantly trying to push. Like your point, I try to, and it's easier now that I have a track record. Right, I've been in town. I've been proving this thing for 3 years. But I remember in the beginning, I remember giving my first presentation to Greater Salisbury Committee, and there was a lot of eyes that were not feeling what I was putting out there. And I know a lot of them have come to me and told me that I've changed their mind, and that makes me feel really good.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, I always think about and tell people is like, I honestly think the greatest benefit of legalizing cannabis, and psychedelics too, that's a whole nother discussion. As I think with
for another podcast, we'll get there before the end of the year.
What's going on in the world right now, I just think it just is going to make people happier and nicer. It's so crazy how we've become so divided and mean. And not to say cannabis is the solution by any means, but in my personal opinion, like I know what it does for myself. It makes me happier. It chills me out, and I think
Get some perspective, right?
yeah, I just so you know, getting rid of the stigma, more opportunities, fair opportunities for business owners like yourself, a better customer experience, i.e., using debit cards, credit cards. When I was here Friday, I went to go check out. I don't ever carry cash on me anymore, so I'm like, oh, what do? I got to go to the ATM. Not only that did that cost me $5 total, it took 4 minutes to go through that whole process to then get back to the point of sale to finish checking out. And I know you guys do hundreds of people a day. I can't imagine that's a great
That's
process to
not. It's not
have.
great for anybody. And like one of the things I'm excited about, and just not to toot our own horn, but our patients won't have to pay that ATM fee anymore.
Yeah.
For some of our patients, like they need not all of our patients should be every dollar they can save or use towards medicine or something like that is better off. And like I'm excited that we're gonna launch this program and we're gonna absorb all of the card fees, and the dispensary is gonna take on that burden so that our patients have a better experience. So one of the things that happens all the time now is we'll be given a patient consultation. They'll have gone to the ATM first. They took out $100. We put together a protocol. It's $108, and they're not going to make that one product offering for $8 because they don't want to go spend another $2.50 in ATM fee and go get another $20 out. Now with the card program, we'll be able to give that consultation, and whatever the dollar amount is, they'll just be able to use their card, swipe, put in their PIN number. It should be faster process for our patients. They should be saving in ATM fees, and it should be more in line with what they would expect at a traditional retailer.
Yeah, I think that's the overall point. That's why I'm excited about our PIN debit program, because again, it is just like going to any store. And yes, you can't pay with a credit card, but some people still pay with their debit card, and if that's the case, it's the same experience. You enter in your 4 digits, and then you're good.
Can you provide these services outside the state of Maryland right now?
Yeah, we can. So we're not only onboarding dispensaries in Maryland, but up in Michigan, up in Massachusetts, up out in California. So this is a
If
nationwide
you're listening to
program.
this and you have a dispensary, you can reach out. So lastly, let's tell people how they get in touch with you personally if they're interested in adding pin-based debit at their dispensary.
Yes, easiest way to get in touch with me, email. My email is Brian, Brian, at solvent.io. You can go to our website, solvent.io, and then if you're on LinkedIn, check me out on LinkedIn, connect with me.
Brian's
And
a great follow on LinkedIn. You post a lot of good articles. I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, I kind of gotten, social media is so funny because before I started Solvent and then TH Suite, I had my own company and really built that from social media, and I spent every day on social media, and now I wouldn't call it burnt out. I'm just taking like an extended break. So I've kind of like released myself from the social media world, and just it's actually been pretty enjoyable.
It's daunting. I mean, it's for us. It's almost the opposite because I can't pay to promote, and I can't sponsor posts and like just
That's
pay.
another disadvantage that you have as a business owner is
Like,
that you
Facebook
can't.
was shutting me down all the time. I was getting banned from Facebook for months at a time because I post something that cannabis related. But the point of I post so much on Facebook and socials because we have to do everything organically, and if we don't post so much, we can't get the information out any other way. But I don't enjoy it. It's daunting, and I wish I could take a vacation. Is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, but you know what? I love what you guys do, and it's good to do that because it's just going to continue to make this business stand out above the rest. Because at the end of the day, social media is not going anywhere. It's only going to become more integrated into our lives, whether you like that or not. And to have that online presence, and it comes back to the brand of Peninsula Wellness, Peninsula Alternative Health, and the more people that see that, the more people that are going to be thinking and becoming potential customers for you. So I think you guys, I mean, this podcast, it's a lot of work. It's you got Brandon over here, doing all the back end work. I mean, it's a lot to do, but it's great to have.
I'm
And
glad we put the content out. Like it's one of the things I really am proud of. Brandon and I made a dedication to start doing this maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And when I look at like our marketing, it's very organic. It's very much like documenting what we do. The podcast is the reason why Brian's on a podcast today is because he's downstairs working in the business. It's not like we just have all this time in the world that we can just sit around. And I think it makes it more real and it makes it more relevant. We're not just trying to have podcasts to create artificial content. We have so much going on that we just want to make sure that we're pulling back the onion, sharing some of the behind the scenes So if you've always wondered why the hell PH doesn't have PIN-based debit, it was because it wasn't really functionally feasible, and now it is. And now we're going to tell you that it is feasible and why it's feasible and what you can expect in the future. And we're going to keep trying to provide more opportunities like this on the podcast. If you enjoyed the show today, make sure you like the YouTube page. Make sure you share it out on social media. We could really use that help. I really thank you for coming on today. It's always a pleasure. I want to talk. Psychedelics before the end of the year.
Next time.
Next time, I think it's something that is very much in line with what we talk about in an overall wellness, plant-based medicine, natural healing, looking at what this earth has to offer us in terms of how we heal ourselves versus what we can make in a lab is something that I'm always going to be questioning and looking forward to. There's been a ton of recent research coming out of our own Johns Hopkins and other universities. The buzzword is microdosing, different types of substances, and back to my overall philosophy of gimmick control, this aligns right in with that. So I'm excited to talk about that and kind of get into nerd out about that. That should be fun. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, had a great time. Now I get to go back downstairs and finish it up.
And work on more credit card machines.
Well, I guess you won't launch this tomorrow, but by the time they see this,
by the time they see us, they should have been swiping their card. So thank Brian for swiping their card, and I appreciate you coming on. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.